All right. Hi, everybody. Today we are on episode 3 of our series on sleep deprivation and anxiety. And again, we have Jen Morley, a therapist who specializes in anxiety, with us from Boulder. And today we're just going to discuss anxiety. We're going to get to the root, we're going to do a deep dive, and then we're going to finish with a sleep tip from me, where to start if you have a baby that is not sleeping through the night. So, really, Jen, I'm just going to hand it over to you. I want to hear from you about everything about anxiety and how it relates to parenthood and motherhood and all of that. So take it away. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, hi. So let's see. It's so funny. You're like, I'm so excited about anxiety. It's always, I am too, but usually that's not really the feeling we have about anxiety, right?
Yeah, I'm excited about bringing it to life,
Right.
talking about it, bringing it into the
Yeah.
light. Like, no more shame. Like, this is a thing. We are going to talk about it. So,
Yeah, it's a really rich thing. So let's just start like the difference between stress and anxiety. So I think sometimes we interchange those words like, oh, I'm really anxious or, oh, I'm really stressed. They're not the same thing actually.
okay.
So stress is very obvious. So I have a project due on Friday at work and I'm not sure I have enough time to do it. I feel like kind of crunched and you feel tension and you feel kind of overwhelmed and you might be irritable and just kind of, but it's very obviously related to a thing and it's time limited and you usually can do it, right? It's like a doing thing. Like I'm stressed that I'm going to do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anxiety is pervasive and it's long lasting. So anxiety is I'm in the grocery store and I just generally feel kind of freaked out or panic or stressed, but not about grocery shopping. I can't name what the stress is about really. Like I could tell you 1,000 things I'm stressed out about, but like it just feels kind of ubiquitous.
Okay.
So
That's very
that's
helpful. Very
right.
helpful.
So it's like a stress feeling that's kind of all the time. And I think of it as like the leaky bucket. When we have anxiety, it's kind of dripping into everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anxiety physical signs usually is we kind of will feel it somewhere in our body. So like maybe feel it in your throat a lot, like your throat's tight or your chest is tight. Um, it can interrupt. This is interesting for sleep. It can either make you sleep too much or not enough, and it's the same thing with depression. It just messes up our sleep cycle, and we went into that a little bit last week, and we'll talk about that some more now. So sleep, our physical body, you'll notice just like it's a little bit like depression, and I think people know like when you lose joy in things that you used to like to do, that's like depression. But anxiety has a similar thing, like there's a way that the sweetness is taken out of the things that you love. You just feel kind of like all the time. So even the things that you really enjoy, like maybe you're being with your baby or with your partner or going on a hike, you just feel like there's always something going on. I One way to think about it is like an app running in the background. Do you know it when you have a app running on your phone that's using your location
Ah,
and it
yes.
sucks your battery?
Yes.
Anxiety is like the app that's running in the background. It's just like always on there and it's like
And are you always aware? Like, is there always a mental presence of the anxiety?
right. So this can be different for different people. So
Mm-hmm.
some people might just be like, I am like so crabby and I don't want to do anything and I'm procrastinating all the time. And, I'm just being, sometimes people are being hyper vigilant and like I'm neurotically cleaning my whole house. And sometimes they're like, I'm doing nothing. Both of those can be signs of anxiety. So you might
Mm-hmm.
not know that you're anxious. If you're a person that's been anxious kind of your whole life, you might be like, man, this is pretty familiar. And my word for that is anxiety. I've worked with people who come in and I'm talking to them and they explain how they've sort of been in their life. And I say, that sounds like anxiety. And they're like, really? And they're 40 years old. So you may or may not know that there's a word for it. But so I want to talk about anxiety relative to becoming and being a parent specifically, because that's what we're doing here.
Yes.
Because there's anxiety that some people have had anxiety like as long as they can remember, right? So you just were like 5 years old and you're like, I'm freaked out about kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's people who are like, I kind of have moments, but like I'm kind of okay. And then you have a baby and now you experience yourself very differently than you did before.
Okay.
And so that particular kind of anxiety is really relevant to, I think, our audience. So that's what I want to stick with.
Great.
Things like when I say you don't recognize who you were before, you'll hear yourself saying things or see yourself doing things that you're like, either like, oh, ugh, or just like, wow, that's not really how I know myself. Or I think we talked about last week, people around you are like, you're being really different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Right?
I can think specifically of myself and my clients where they're checking their children's breathing over and over and over,
Right.
or double checking the car seat straps, and being really short with their friends, or not thinking the same show, like watching Friends again and being like, this isn't funny. Like, I don't get it. Like, why, kind of that crabby. Do you see other specific things related to parenthood, like symptoms that a mom that's watching this right now might be like, oh, I've never put that together? I mean,
Right.
you've named a few, but I just wanted to open and
Right.
see if there was any
There's
other.
different types of anxiety. So if you look in, you can Google this. There's just generalized anxiety, which is that leaky bucket that I told you about. And that's just sort of like, meh. And then there's more phobic anxiety, which is what we tend to get a lot as parents, which is like, oh my God, there's snow outside. My baby's going to die in a car accident.
Mm-hmm.
In like 2 inches of snow, right? Like we're not talking
Right.
about like snowmageddon and my baby. And like a way, part of you can be like, well, it was never a problem before, but part of you is like, no, like I am terrified.
Yes.
So that's
Okay.
part of the hypervigilance around checking your baby's breathing.
Okay.
Worried they're going to choke on like anything they eat, or the bottle warmer is going to burn down the house, or
Okay.
like, so that comes more into, and at some point I will also tell you that that anxiety can verge over into OCD.
Mm-hmm.
And OCD, we think of it as like, I wash my hands all the time. And that is a little bit of it. That's more like the, how we think of it colloquially, like culturally.
Yes.
True OCD also can have obsessive, strange thoughts, usually really disturbing, violent or sexual content.
Okay.
So that can be a facet of anxiety. If you're finding yourself actually thinking things that are like thoughts that just come into your head, like my baby being dismembered. I mean, like horrific things. You're like,
Mm-hmm.
what? Ah!
Yeah.
That might be a sign of anxiety.
Okay.
OCD is thought about in a little bit different way, but I'm talking about it because it can present as a really extreme form of anxiety. So that could be things like, I have to sterilize the bottles 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to be 4 times, right? Not 3 times and not 5 times. It has to be 4 times. I go back and I sterilize it, and then I run it again, and then I run it again. And then, okay, now I can do it. So if you find yourself kind of ritualizing around fear, that is, might be a sign that like you're in an amount of anxiety that really you could probably use some support with, and your brain is overwhelmed enough that it's going to be pretty hard to just casually come out of it.
Okay. So if we're there,
yeah,
and any of that,
you're doing the bottles.
if
right?
any of that is happening, and anything that we just discussed is pinging somebody in our audience to say like, what are the options? Like, where do you start? Where do we go for help?
Right. So first thing first, even if you don't have it, so it's not like you're going to go in and they're going to be like, you have the big like sticker, here's a label, you're diagnosed with the thing. You do or you don't, it sort of doesn't matter. I would start with a therapist probably. A lot of people go to their primary care physicians, and they are wonderful humans who are really there to serve, but it's actually not their expertise. It'd be a little bit like me trying to help your strep throat.
Mm-hmm.
They know about it. They usually do 1 stint of residency in mental health and psychology. It's like one of, like surgery, and it's like 3 months or whatever that they spend doing that. I'm not sure the exact length, but that's not their specialty. So first I would start with a therapist, because a therapist is really going to be focused about, a good therapist is going to be able to help you recognize the patterns that are going on. And self-reflect to you so you can see yourself a little better. We're all like, in general, like I think the women that we're talking with, we're smart women. We're successful in our life. Like we could figure things out. if we could kind of see ourselves a little better. And
Mhm.
so what you want is a therapist who can kind of help you see yourself, because if you
Yes.
see it, you're going to find your own path. Your therapist isn't going to be like, hey, there's the way. She's going to help you find it, or they're going to help you find it for yourself.
It's like so
Right.
many things. I mean, mothers are doing this all the time. They see a need in their child's life, they attend. They see a need in their spouse's life, they attend. They see a need in a friend's life, they attend. And it feels to me like it's a chance to have somebody else know, like a professional, because all those people hopefully are doing that for you too, but a professional who is there for your mental, emotional, spiritual needs and will press pause, hold space, and notice those needs with you, and like give them attention. I love what therapy can do.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'm a fan too. So one of the things I think that can be common too is like, it's not appropriate in most of our relationships to talk for 40 minutes about ourselves, right? Like, you're not going to hang out with people who do that very often. So that's the nice thing about a therapist. Sometimes one of the rich parts is just hearing yourself say all the things like, I needed to say those things, and then I heard them, and just that process can be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of what kind of therapy is out there and what kind of treatments we're looking at, there's a few things that you're going to want to consider that I would say we want to consider. Birth itself is considered a trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Even if you had a healthy baby and you're like, I wasn't traumatized, you might be fine. But it's something that often when we go back, so you talked about, Sarah, you had asked me about a timeline. And so anxiety, sometimes we find ourselves needing to get some support even before we have a baby.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a brilliant time. If you are a mama right now watching this and you either have a little and you're going to have more littles, or you're on your first baby and you're just getting ready, I would when you start hearing yourself talk and saying what you need to say to the therapist, what you find out about yourself and your own needs is such a rich place. And you can just really be there for yourself in a way that
Mm-hmm.
is a lot harder once you have a baby.
Yeah.
So I really
Absolutely.
recommend that piece. In terms of usually once you have your baby, most people, I would say, certainly in the first few weeks, and sometimes even through that fourth trimester, it's really trying to survival mode, right? So that first 3 months, you're probably not going to be in a space to like dig into your stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you are and you feel like, oh my God, I got to talk to someone right now, or I'm sinking, and you're in that space, then you go.
Right.
What I find is there's usually more availability after the first 3 months for a mama to start to be like, okay, where's what and what's up, and
Mm-hmm.
okay, like I got to start sorting this out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I do want to say, like, sometimes we have our healthy birth, we have our baby, we're like, whatever, cesarean or natural birth, I'm good. And then somewhere later, we realize, like, I feel sort of disturbed, actually. Like, this is what happens when we're in true, like, birth is fight or flight. Like, we are literally surviving. We're keeping us and our baby alive. These are literally life and death, and that's what we're doing.
Right.
So our brain stores all the extra parts
Right.
until we feel calmer. And so later on in your baby's progression, that stuff might just come rolling out. You're like, I thought I had a great birth. And then you're like, actually, when I think about it, like, it's maybe a little upsetting.
Absolutely. And besides sleep support, I am a birth doula, and I see that a lot where
Right.
it's not necessarily the type of birth you have that attaches a label as traumatic. It is often whether or not you felt like you had choice, and it's often if you felt listened to. It often feel like if you had time, if it's all these different things. And I know I've given birth 3 times. One was an emergency C-section. One was an epidural, and one was unmedicated in the shower. And all so different. And I would tell you that one was more traumatic than the others. And it's not what you would think, and it's because of my prep work with therapists, feeling like I had choice, my processing immediately after. And that's actually why I love your service as a therapist, that you can do video support, because if you're at home in your fourth trimester and you're ready to talk to somebody, how great that now we have the technology that, I could get on your calendar on day 5 and not leave my house. That's just
Right.
incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an amazing thing. I also, so you can be in your house in your jammies. And also if you want to come in, you're always welcome. I think not only in my space, but a lot of therapists, hopefully, as long as your baby's not mobile, you can just bring your baby. If you're like, I
Mhm.
don't have childcare, like you can sit there and nurse and we can figure it out. And
Love that.
so whatever it takes to be able to get you what you need. So
That's
I
awesome.
want to make sure that we get into, I'm like, have notes in front of me. I'm following here.
Yes, please.
The types of treatment that you might expect for anxiety, and then
Sure.
also postpartum, any kind of postpartum experiences. So we have, let's see, just mindfulness stuff. It's like talking, more self-awareness, more aware of like kind of what's happening in your body,
Mhm.
using your body to help calm your mind. So that might be your breathing. So your breathing's a facet of
Mhm.
your body. There's really cool research about breathing, and tons of traditions that are 1,000 years old around breathing. So
Yes.
we've known for a long time that that can be amazing. Um, just there's also CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, which is really it's a little bit of mindfulness. So paying attention to your thoughts, your behaviors, and your actions, and how they all work together. Like, oh, I have the thought that like my baby's not going to be okay, so then I go in the kitchen, I wash the bottles 4 times, and
Mhm.
then I feel less stress. Or I have this fear, and then I do this, and then I feel this. So the cycle of kind of, so it's sort of breaking it down.
Mhm.
Um, there's kind of a balance in most therapy between a plan, like here's things we can do,
Right.
here's a way we can understand, here's a way we can frame, here's an action step, and then tolerating your own experience more,
Mhm.
and being able to just say, I'm anxious. Like, so when you go to therapy, you may not go into therapy and then your anxiety's gone. That's probably not the most likely outcome.
Okay.
It's more likely you're going to come into therapy, and when you're going to be less freaked out by your anxiety, first of all. So you
Mhm.
still have it, but it's not like um, a double wound, right? So it's not like I have anxiety and I'm freaked out about the anxiety. Now it's like I have anxiety and it's like, oh gosh, that's hard to have and it's painful and it's frustrating, but I like actually can do it. So we'll keep going.
Mhm.
Um, Medication, I'm not going to list medications. There's a lot of medications. So when you go to your therapist, if you decide with your therapist that like medication is probably a really great place to go,
Mhm.
I would highly recommend. Most therapists can't prescribe, so you need to go to a psychiatrist.
Mhm.
If you're getting your medication through your primary care physician, most people do that. They are also not specifically trained in that.
Right.
Um,
Psychopharmacology
right.
is
So
the specialty of a psychologist.
right. And because of, and I don't know that I have references offhand, but I know there are at least a few psychiatrists around who specifically do postpartum,
Great. Mhm.
because what you're now working with is a very specific human chemical cocktail because of the hormones that you have if you're nursing and when you're postpartum,
Mhm.
in addition to adding in the chemicals of whatever psychopharmaceuticals you're going to be using.
Right.
That's a lot. And it's not really in the purview of a primary care physician.
Okay.
Um, so I highly recommend a psychiatrist if you want to get meds. And there are certainly meds that have been around a long, long, long time. You know, things like as old as Prozac, that we have a pretty good idea how they affect women who are nursing, if that's a concern,
Mhm.
after you have your baby.
Mhm.
There's quite a few meds that are for anxiety. What you're going to find usually is even a well-trained psychologist, you're likely going to get on a med and try it and be like, that one didn't quite, I didn't like how that worked.
Mhm.
It's sort of like dating. You're going to have to probably try a few, and then
Yes.
you'll find one that was like, oh, I think this one's the right one. And then you're going to play with the dose a little bit.
Okay.
And most medications you can get on them and you can get off them when you feel like you're done, but you would certainly want to do that process in conjunction with your psychiatrist and or therapist.
Okay. Makes sense.
Very few you can get on and then just cut it off one day and be done and things go well. They're
Right.
usually a taper up and a taper down.
Mhm.
So, and that, I will tell you, I know a lot of mamas who having some meds postpartum was really a game changer.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
it sounds like what I'm hearing is that timeline wise, it's never too late to get help.
Mhm.
It's never too early in your parenthood journey either. Like I know
Right.
I've done therapy in preparation for a birth. Um, and it feels like there's so many different options. Like I heard you list like 3 major categories of treatment. And so just reaching out is probably the first step in getting connected to somebody. And for those moms and dads that don't recognize their new self, like what would you say if they're in this moment? Because I feel like our culture gives us so much shame and judgment around having anxiety or needing help, or like this change in identity and losing yourself or finding yourself in parenthood. And like what would you say to those parents right now that are just like, I know I'm not me, I don't feel like myself? You know,
Yay.
it's a
Yeah.
big mind shift.
Yeah, I'm saying yeah because that was a great segue, Sarah. Thanks. So this idea of like it's okay to not know who you are right now, that you're not supposed to know actually.
Hmm.
So when we have a baby, we lose usually if we had a career, we lose that at least for some part of the time, and certainly the caliber that we're in our career before is probably gone. The friends that we had, the activities that we did, our relationship with our husband, our relationship with our body, our free time, most of the ways that we knew ourselves, that we know how to know who we are, and
Hmm.
then from there to take care of ourselves and manage our life, they're gone.
Yeah.
So there's a way in which we talk about we've actually died. There's like a psychological death, and you're going to become a new person. You're going to
Mm.
create a new identity, and it's really rich and beautiful, but it comes out of kind of a dark place, having
Mm.
lost so much of yourself. And that is the right good thing to be going through. It's just not comfortable.
Yeah.
So if you're
Interesting.
lost, you're in the right place. So don't put on yourself that you're also failing because you're lost. You can not like it, and you can be sad, or you can be angry, or you can be confused, you can be all those things. But I really invite people to not shame yourself for being lost, because that's precisely where you should be when you're going to become this new amazing mama, woman, whoever you want to be.
It is so beautiful. I know last week you used the words metamorphosis. I think of that. I see like this beautiful, colorful, you know, long awaited butterfly that comes out after this.
Yeah.
I feel like there's sort of a grieving process and a phoenix out of the ashes. I see all of that. I feel it in myself. Um, I'm only 14 months postpartum. I know you're less postpartum than that. And we're still in it too. We don't have it all figured out. And I love the idea of not feeling shame for not knowing where you are or feeling lost. And that's precisely what I bring to sleep support, which is how we wanted to end today's video, is giving a nugget of what to do if you feel lost with baby sleep. So we know that sleep deprivation affects anxiety in all the ways that we've been talking about. So what does a parent do if they know that their child isn't sleeping through the night? It's unpredictable. It's not restful for them or for their child. Like what are we to do? And so I'm gonna link up in the show notes below a cheat sheet. So I've created a baby and toddler sleep cheat sheet, and it's just the 6. It's an aggregate of the 6 leading research articles and journals on what average sleep looks like for each developmental age. So from 0 0 months old to 5 years old, you're going to get kind of a glimpse at how many naps is usual at 9 months, how many hours overnight can I expect. And I want parents to start with the cheat sheet before they do anything else, just to establish their expectations, because that is the first and most important step I take with all of my clients. And in fact, it sometimes is enough to completely change their baby's sleep habit. So if you are requesting too much sleep, let's say out of a 9-month-old, if you're expecting 12 hours overnight, that's not in fact developmentally possible. And so what you're going to end up is a lot of wakes and a lot of adjustments, alert periods to make up for the request for 12 hours. So if parents want to start somewhere, I recommend the cheat sheet. And I'm always here to get on the phone. I have a free call that you can register on my website and get on my calendar and ask your biggest question. And I love sending people in the right direction. So hopefully after today's video, all of the parents watching know something they can do for sleep, and at least one, probably 10 things that they can do to take a step in the right direction for their mental wellness specific to anxiety. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for another great conversation. I know next week we're going to talk about marriage and marriage therapy options and how to stay close during this transition. I want to send it back to you, and you can close us out, and I will see you next week.
Yay. Thank you so much, Sarah. I want to tell everyone Sarah's being awesome and plugging her cheat sheet. That was a game changer in my home.
Great.
We were putting my baby down too long, and as soon as we made him really tired, instantly it made things better. There were some more steps to get it to great, but it got instantly better with not putting him down too early. So
I love it. We'd rather have awesome consolidated sleep than lots of pockets of sleep,
right.
24 hours for
Yeah.
sure. So
Yeah. So, and if you're not sleeping as an adult, then you might want to be talking to your therapist, because if your baby's sleeping and you're not sleeping, you're probably anxious.
that's right.
So,
All right. Till next week, everybody. Bye.
okay, take care.